Russia come up with new threats allegedly coming from Ukraine and defines new targets for its aggression. During a demonstration lesson talk about the important in Kaliningrad on September 1, Vladimir Putin announced the need to destroy the so-called anti-Russian enclave on the territory of Ukraine.
Our task is to protect people and, of course, to protect Russia itself, because an anti-Russian enclave has begun to be created on the territory of today's Ukraine.
These words indicate that the aggressor state plans to gather new forces for an offensive against Ukraine. This is the conclusion of the American Institute for the Study of War.
Putin's reiteration of an anti-Russian entity that must be defeated militarily to defend Russia reaffirms his maximalist intentions for Ukraine and is likely intended to set the information conditions to call for further Russian efforts and force generation going into the fall and winter of this year, from the report of the Institute for the Study of War.
The Ukrainian authorities are also confident that the war will not end quickly.
Vladimir Putin put everything on one card, the card of war with Ukraine, hoping that he will stop and not try to bring it to its logical end is self-deception. Today Putin wants to take a break because he sees that the Russians are burning out. But we know how hard their military-industrial complex is working today. We know how many tanks and missiles they have with which they are equipped. Alexei Danilov, Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, in an interview with the Polish edition Gazeta Wyborcza.
The losses of the Russian army are significant, the reserve is almost exhausted. In order to continue the war, the Kremlin decided to increase the number of military personnel. At the end of August, Putin announced his decision to recruit 137,000 soldiers into the army. All of them need to be provided with clothing, shoes, food and equipment. But despite the fact that the economy is bursting at the seams, money is not spared in Russia to continue the war.
Russia has dramatically increased funding for its military sector. The military-industrial complex has received hundreds of billions of additional money to replenish for the losses in equipment and weapons that they carry at the front from Ukrainian armed forces.
The blitzkrieg plan failed. The Russian army did not succeed in capturing Ukraine in 3 days, or before May 9, or before Independence Day. Moscow has to change not only its plans, but also manuals. Now the Kremlin is preparing Russians for a long war. This is confirmed by the latest statements by top officials of the occupying state.
Цели нашей внешней политики в этой
The goal of our foreign policy remain unchanged. This is ensuring our national security in a reliable way. This is the creation the most favorable conditions for our development.
Until recently, the goals of the war were called denazification and demilitarization, and later, supposedly, the protection of the Donbas residents. Now the accents have changed.
Not only the existence of our country as an integral, sovereign, strong state depends on the outcome of the operation, but also what the world will be like after its completion. Valentina Matviyenko, chair of the Federation Council of the Federal Assembly of the Russian Federation, on the website of the Federation Council.
These statements are an attempt to prove to the Russians that the war is a matter of the survival of Russia. Words about alleged denazification have been replaced by concerns about a threat to security. Exactly this interpretation makes it possible to explain why 6 months later the once second army of the world has no obvious successors, just as there are no at least approximate prospects for the end of the war. Reported by Serhiy Kulyas, Valeria Nekipelova, UATV News.